So welcome back Inside Marketing. This time we have sort of an election vibe going with elections being in the news and a really cool article that came out at Read Write Web that talks about how people don't rely on social channels as much as they used to for getting their election information. This actually refers to a study that Pew Internet did, and it's very interesting because it breaks down all the different sources of news, and the net is that something's happening here, that people are not doing a whole lot on social channels when it comes to getting election information. What's changed? I thought this was going to be the year of the social voter and social elections like it was a few years ago. What do you think, Jeff? What's happened between now and, say, the last election cycle?
I think one of the things to look at is who's involved in the election process up to this point. Up to this point, we've really only dealt with the Republican Party, the Republican primaries, and I think it's interesting to look at the fact that, stereotypically, the Republican Party is much more skewed towards the older generations, whereas the Democratic Party is more skewed towards the younger generations who tend to use social media more. It's also interesting to point out, the Democratic primaries last year were much more intriguing, much more exciting. We had Hillary Clinton trying to be the first woman president. We had Barack Obama trying to be the first African American. So there's a lot more things to talk about from a youth standpoint, and I think that's why they were much more engaged, and that made social media more engaged during the election time.
So I think I'll buy some of that if you look at the last cycle, you had people like Howard Dean, you had President Obama's campaign that really made social media a primary way to engage with the younger voters. I don't think we've really seen as much of that this go-round. So maybe this is just part of it, is there's just fewer people who are following and engaging on social channels. So maybe that's part of it. Now the other thing is, which I thought was interesting, is when you look at the breakdown of different sources, I think there's a deeper meaning here in terms of the value of sources and brands versus channels that are more about information sharing and user-generated content. What do you think, Shob? Was that part of it too, that people still trust certain brands to get their news, especially about something important like an election?
And I think it goes to something we were talking about earlier, which is that there is still a lot to be said about the trustability of a source. So while breaking news kind of stuff and that, those types of news items where it's kind of just something that's just coming up and is spreading through the social channels very quickly, we might tend to pay attention to that. I think for more concrete issues like the election, we still tend to overall trust more established sources. That being said, if you look at the numbers, there definitely is a decreasing trend. If you look at 2000 to the 2012 cycle, clearly some of the numbers here, local TV news went from almost 50% to about 30% right now. It's interesting that same thing for local daily news. The one interesting thing I think, and Alan, you pointed this out earlier, is that the internets kind of seemed to max out. In 2007, it was at about 24%. January 2012, we're at 25. So I don't know what that really says about how much of the influence comes from internet sources.
So I think what we're seeing is that if you look at that same chart when people check out the article, we're seeing more and more fragmentation. So for any one type of media, there's more and more options that are competing with it. So internet itself is being fragmented. Let's not forget that social sites are part of the internet, and there's internet newspapers, there's the Huffington Posts and Salon and things like that. There's internet sites for newspapers and for broadcast media. And oh, by the way, there's all the social media sites like Facebook, although Facebook's clearly not a news gathering organization. Some other internet sites could be news gathering organizations. So I think source has a lot to do with it. Of course, there's quirks in this too, and if you look through the data, and I encourage people to check it out, you have these sort of quirks like, more people look at late night comedy shows as a source of election information than they do national newspapers. And maybe that's more just an indictment of the declining role of national newspapers, or the fact that culturally we're trusting sort of personalities more than experts. I don't know. That's kind of a quirky thing. So let's wrap this up with, what does this mean for marketers? I'll let you go first, and then I'll let Jeff sort of put in his last word. What does this mean as digital marketers Do we have to have more of a balanced approach? Does it mean that social is diminishing, or does it mean that it depends on what we're trying to sell?
I think it's definitely the latter. It depends on what we're trying to sell, and when it comes to something like breaking news, I'll bring that up again, or more, lifestyle-oriented products. It clearly is where social media really plays strongly for a brand, but I think for something like politics, it still is more of a traditional medium that seems to have the credibility that people are looking for when they want to make informed decisions.
So what do you think, Jeff? I'll give you the last word here. Is this just a generational thing, and social media has a role, but at the end of the day, we want good information, even though we might pick it up, say, from our friends on social media, we're still going to go to the newspaper site or watch the replay of the broadcast on YouTube because we want the actual reporter telling us the information that we need to know?
I really think it's going to come down to your target audience and who you're trying to reach. I don't think just social or focusing on just network news is approach. You have to have a good mix and understanding who you're trying to reach. You can maybe put more emphasis on one than the other, but I definitely feel that having your hands in everything is the important way to go about it.
So with that, I'll consider this a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you check out the post, and lots of great data here, and I'm sure we'll be talking about more news about the election in the next episode and the future episodes of Inside Marketing. Thanks for tuning in.